Mr. Kevin Kling is well known in his home state of Minnesota. And when you hear him speak, you'll know exactly that he is Minnesotan. And yet, he has a particular charm that makes him your next door neighbor. Here's Kevin Kling.
Hey everybody. All right, that was good. Here, I'll teach people from different areas teach how to say hello. So I'm going to teach you how to say hello in Minnesota. So say, hey. Hey. Okay, now cut the volume in half. Hey. Now cut the emotion in half. Hey. I've been thinking about what it's so great to be back and be live again, being with people. I noticed when I know, yeah. And I noticed when coming back, it was hard to come back as a performer. And I noticed the audience too was it was an interesting thing. We were just going, how do we do this again? And so I started noticing, okay, what has changed? What had changed since COVID? And I remember one of the things that changed, do you have those little free libraries here? You know those little libraries that are in front of houses where people put books and you take a book or you leave a book? They have those by my house, and I'd walk to the coffee shop and I noticed that a house by me, their books kind of politically lean to the left, and down the street, their books kind of politically lean to the right. So just as a civic duty, I would take one book out of the first one and then when I'd come back, I'd take a book from that one and bring it back to the other one. And then I found out I was bringing the same book on Richard Nixon back and forth, so I stopped. But then people started, when COVID came, but when there were books in there, you could learn all about a family. I mean, you look at their books, you'd find out health conditions, home projects, how their kids were doing. You could learn so much about it. I remember one time I'm passing a house and a guy pulls up, I go, hey, try a little vinegar on a Q-tip. And now they've started to put, food in there. When COVID came, they started to put different food in there. So now on the way to the coffee shop, I'll pull out a bag of brown rice, and on the way home, I'll bring a can of Spam. So another thing I noticed, I talked to a guy, one of the first show that I came back. This guy, I said, and I was talking about near-death experiences, I'll get to a little bit later, but I was talking to this guy about what it was like, and he says, I've had so many in my life. And I said, well, just tell me about one. He goes, okay, I'll tell you about the latest one. This is what this guy told me. He goes, he has experimental aircrafts, these little tiny airplanes. And he said he was flying one time, and he was coming near home, and he went to put his landing gear down, but it wouldn't go down. He said he tried, and the landing gear wouldn't go down. So he started circling around, trying to figure out what to do. And he called his wife. He called his wife on the cell phone, and she answered the phone, and he goes, honey, here's what I need you to do. I'm up in the plane. I need you to go to the safe and get out our life insurance policy. I never had it notarized. And he goes, I think I can keep this thing in the air a couple of hours, get to the lawyer, and get this thing notarized. So he kept the plane in the air for a couple of hours, and his wife called him back, okay, I got it notarized. All right, now he's got to land. So he comes in, and he goes belly up right into the airport, and he makes it, and he figured those couple of hours probably saved his life because the plane was a lot lighter because he was out of fuel, and the other thing was there was nothing to catch on fire, and so he figured that's what saved his life. And so that's what I took from that is when we are in a situation, when we are in something we have no control over, just do the next right thing and things will take care of themselves. So now I'm going to start the program. So as a storyteller, you never know where you're going to be. You never know what's going to happen. Years ago, I was traveling across northern Minnesota, and I came to the town of Hibbing, and they had a big sign out in front of Hibbing. It said, the Guthrie Theater presents Kevin Kling. But the February wind had blown the P away. So it said, the Guthrie Theater resents Kevin Kling. I already knew it. I knew it already. So it's signs. I started thinking, what are signs? Because as a storyteller, what are the signs? What are the signs that are leading to this day? Because a storyteller is really beholding to the moment they're on stage. So I looked up, my wife from her aunt got these signs. These are actual church bulletins that we found, and I wanted to read these. Okay, these are actual church bulletins. The fasting and prayer conference includes meals. The sermon this morning, Jesus walks on the water. Sermon tonight, searching for Jesus. Ladies, don't forget the rummage sale. It's a chance to get rid of those things not worth keeping around the house. Bring your husbands. For those of you who have children and don't know it, we have a nursery downstairs. Oh, I think this one here, this is my favorite one. The low self-esteem group will meet Thursday at 7 p.m. Please use back door. The 8th graders will be presenting Shakespeare's Hamlet in the church basement Friday at 7. The congregation is invited to attend this tragedy. And finally, the associate minister unveiled the church's new campaign slogan last Friday. I upped my pledge, up yours. So now we've got the announcements out of the way. Mary Oliver said, it's not the weight, it's how we carry it. Johnny Cash said, talent is God-given, but our style comes from our limitations. There's a great saying from Zimbabwe, until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero. When I think of stories, I think of the four brothers. There's this story about four brothers, and they all went out to get an education. And the first brother went out, and he became a famous architect, known for his beautiful bridges and buildings. The second brother went out, and he became a doctor, famous for curing people. Third brother went out, and he got into the mystical sciences, spirituality. And the fourth brother never really could find his calling. He just wandered from city to city to city. Okay, so the brothers get together, a family reunion, and they go, let's go out and see who got the best education. So they're walking along, and they come across a dead lion. And they say, okay, let's use this lion to see who got the best education. And the first brother's off, the architect, and he sets the bones up just the way the bones of the lion would be. The second brother comes in and puts on the muscles and the skin and the organs, so now it looks just like a lion. And the third brother gets ready to breathe the breath of life into the lion when the fourth brother climbs up into a tree. The third brother breathes into the lion, it comes to life, it eats the three brothers, and the fourth brother climbs out of the tree and says, now we'll never know who got the best education. So, that's the way I look at a story, is that we have all these elements, we have all these disjuncted elements that all come together like that fourth brother. And that's the way I see a story working. But when I was a kid, there were two kinds of fairy tales. Fairy tales I hated and fairy tales I hadn't read yet. Because it always ended up bad for the guy with a disability, right? I mean, Snow White, she trades in 7 perfectly good little ones for one big one. Ugly Duckling starts out great, this giant duck that steps on all the other ducks. And I thought, this is great. And then they find out, no, he's really a swan. Ah, man. I liked it better when they thought he was a duck, this huge uber duck. And then I found out he's a swan. What does that do for me, a kid with a disability? Hope a ship of aliens lands and goes, no, you're really one of us. Meanwhile, I'm stuck living with ducks. But nobody's ever laughed at that. That's just like, I had to pause. Okay, but my grandmother would say, Kevin, no, a story can go any way you want it to go. That's why they were called folk tales, because they changed with the people. And so this is one of the stories my grandmother would tell me. And it's about the time back in the day when pots and pans could talk, which they still do. And this man would go to the river and fill 2 pots with water and bring them home. And one day, a small crack developed in one of the pots. And as time went on, that crack widened until by the time the man got home, all the water had leaked out of that pot. So finally, the pot turns to the man and says, please, every day you take me to the river, every day that water leaks out, please replace me with another pot. And the man turned to the pot and he said, look down the trail. And the pot looked down the trail. And on the side of the trail with the pot that didn't have a crack, it was craggy and rocky and barren. But on the side of the path with the pot with the crack, wildflowers grew. And the man said, every day you water those flowers. Every day you make my difficult journey beautiful. I think I'll keep you. And with that, my grandmother would wrap her large Teutonic arms around me and say, I think we'll keep you. So those were the stories I got. And I know I became a storyteller because of my left arm, because people use different words around me. They called my arm withered or crippled or say, you poor thing, or what happened. But by the words they chose, I could tell whether they blamed me, my parents, God, or themselves for my condition. And with that information, I could get what I needed out of them. It's the way a kid works. I realized that, and rhetoric became very important. I learned that it wasn't just what people said, it's how and why they say things. I also learned I was part of a family. And this is one of my favorite words. My favorite word is belong. And the reason I love that word is because it's a paradox. It's being and longing. Being somewhere and longing to be somewhere else. It's a paradox that we love as humans. We live in that world. And so that is one of my favorite words. There's this great story I saw on PBS where this Professor Leakey, goes down into Africa and he does this digging. And he finds out when the Ice Age receded, humans to survive had to learn different skills. And he figured they needed to learn 3 specific new skills. One was a new language to fit for being carnivores instead of herbivores. The second was they had to have tools that they could use, hunting tools instead of harvesting tools. And the third he couldn't figure out. He looked all over, he couldn't figure out, but he knew there was something missing. And sure enough, hundreds of miles from the original digging, he found his answer. They did a digging and found a woman that had brittle bone disease. In other words, she had needed to be carried from site to site to site. And that's when Professor Leakey found the third, and what he considered the most important of all our new developments, and that was compassion. We need compassion. It's not just an emotion, it is a survival skill. And Darwin said that what makes us the same defines our species, but our survival depends upon what makes us different. So differences are vital to our survival. Yeah. I have a friend named Al, he's a medicine man up on the Lakudere Reservation in Wisconsin, and he says you can survive anything with sense of humor and sense of self. And I agree, sense of humor is vital, and it's not universal. People think that humor is universal. Oh no, it's really specific. But when we laugh at something together, we're family. I remember I was in Australia once, and I was with this guy, Clem Guittard, and this emu, this flightless bird goes running by, and he goes, fast food. And And then that night, I decided to tell these guys ice fishing stories. I thought I'd blow their minds because they never see it below 70 degrees. So I'm telling them these ice fishing stories. Like I was telling about, like even this stage is about the size of an ice fishing house, a little bit smaller. And we have holes in the corners where you drop your lines down. You never know what you're going to catch. In fact, a couple of years ago, a buddy of mine was ice fishing, and bam, something hit, something bigger than he'd ever had. And he finally reeled this thing in, and he pulls it up, and it's a license plate. And he throws it in the corner, and then he runs and grabs it and runs out front to see the hole in the ice where his truck used to be. So I'm telling these guys this story, and they're laughing like a bunch of Minnesotans. And so later I say, how do you guys get this? How do you understand our sense of humor? You've never even seen snow. And they said, well, you have to understand, our weather can kill us too, only from the other end of the thermometer. And it was true. That sense of weather combined us. And so me being very specific about my home brought us together in an even closer way. So I tell stories. I tell stories, family stories, when I travel, because that's the way we connect. In fact, I was in New York City years ago, and I was the first time I was going to get to perform in New York. Oh man, I was so excited, and I was there that morning having my breakfast: toast and eggs and potatoes and coffee. And the waitress is walking by, so I ask if I can get some water, and she goes, "It's in the coffee." So that's why, okay, this is not Minnesota. So I told them a story. This is the story, and I've told this here before, but this is the story that I told them in New York to put them in kind of a Minnesota frame of mind. It's also the first time I was struck by lightning. And I'm laying in a puddle, in a puddle of water, and my dad is with me. I'm 14 years old, and he's just asked for a screwdriver. So I'm handing it over to him when I look up, and these thunderheads, these big clouds we get up in Minnesota, started moving in over us. I'm thinking, man, we're going to get soaking wet. All of a sudden, bam, lightning struck that puddle, and I felt my organs bonk together. I felt my stomach hit my liver, hit my spleen. I think, man, I've been hit by lightning. I've been hit by lightning. And then I think the fact I know I've been hit means I'm still alive. I go, Dad, we've been hit by lightning. And my dad goes, oh, dang it, that does it. Let's go home. Farm boy. Can't stay out here all day. We'll just keep getting hit by lightning. So years later, my dad passed away, and I'm at one of these round tables at the receptions, and we're remembering my dad as vividly as possible because we knew we're not getting any more new memories, so we're holding on to the old ones as tight as we can. And I decided to tell that story about when Dad and I were hit by lightning, and my uncles are there, my brother, my grandpa, and I just start into it when all of a sudden my Uncle Donald, sitting across the table, goes, wait a second. He goes, I've been struck by lightning. He says, I've been struck 3 times. And you know what? Once you've been hit by lightning, your chances of getting hit again increase by over 50%. It's true. He said, it's actually more the symptom than the problem. My grandpa said he was hit 4 times. One time coming in from the field, he had his tool belt on. Lightning struck, bam! And Grandpa said he flew up in the air and formed a fountain with himself and his tools. Uncle Byron was hit 4 times, and he drives an Airstream trailer home, one of those metal trailer homes. We're going, Byron, you're begging for it, pal. But I found out then and there, all my uncles, my grandpa, my dad, my brother, myself, we were all struck by lightning. So I told them that story, or the day as they put it, I found out I was not adopted. So I've told that story for years, but I found out recently that my mom said she had this old antenna on the roof of her house. She was changing her TV station when lightning hit the antenna. It blasted her across the room. And she called me before the doctor and said, I knew it wasn't just on your father's side. So my dad, I keep thinking, I'm around the age when he passed away. So I keep thinking when I look in the mirror, I'm going to see him looking back at me, but I don't. I don't look like my dad. But sometimes I'll hear his phrases spring from my lips, phrases that don't make any sense to me, like it's hotter than a $3 pistol, or it's colder than old Billy Ned. Or one time he said, Kevin, you're about as funny as a hole in the fence. I know some of these come from his farming background, like you're so educated, you're stupid. Or when I couldn't get my go-kart to work, he said, the loose nut is usually the one on the seat. I go, Dad, it worked fine yesterday. That's what the farmer said about his dead mule. So I remember one time my dad's phrases were put to the test. Okay, we're going to swimming lessons, and my sister and her friend are in the front seat, and my brother and I, we're in the back seat. And my dad has just said that something was tight. I think it was a jar lid. And he goes, yeah, that jar lid was tighter than... And he stops. Now, my brother and I had heard many of his tighter than analogies, so we knew none of them were appropriate for this present company. And finally, my dad stammers out, tighter than the bark on a tree. Oh, we laughed our heads off. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even getting my dad's phrases right. Like my neighbor Misha has a 9-year-old son, and he said the other day he was telling his son a joke. He said, a 3-legged dog walks into the bar and says, I'm looking for the man who shot my paw. Well, Misha overhears his son telling one of his little friends the joke, and he's going, a 3-legged dog walks into the bar and says, I'm looking for the man who shot my dad. And both boys are laughing their heads off. So I'm helping my brother get a dock out of a lake. We're having a really hard time because these bolts are just rusted on. We're trying to get these bolts off this dock. And finally my brother, just exasperated, he goes, that bolt is tighter than the bark on a tree. Oh man, we laughed our heads off. But the best part was, there's my nephew staring right at us. And I think, perfect. That phrase will live another generation. So I don't know if you know this about Americans. We have what's called the long gene. It's a genetic anomaly that's found more in America than anywhere else on the planet. And it's called the long gene. It's found in people that have broken away from society. Explorers tend to have it, and adventurers, the whatever happened to's in their high school reunions, whose last words are usually, watch this, or what's this do? And my dad was definitely a member of the Long Gene Club. He had one of those experimental aircrafts. And I remember I'd be at college, and all of a sudden I'd hear this airplane buzzing the campus, prop back, flaps up, me. And I'd turn to the kid next to me, and I'd go, my dad's here, my dad's here. And I'd run to the airport, and there my dad would be with the props still going around. And I'd hop up on the wing, I'd get in the plane, we'd pull the cowling over, and then we'd fly down the Minnesota River Valley. So then this time of year, the leaves are so beautiful. And one time, we're flying down the river valley. When we hit a fog bank, I mean, you couldn't see anything. And I look over at my dad, and like usual, he's shelling peanuts, drinking hot coffee, unfolding a map, and tapping an instrument. And he turns to me and he says, hey, Kev, do me a favor, and look out that window and see if you can spot the ground. I'm looking out the window when I hear my dad say, hey, Kev, it might not be down. So my dad was a person of the sky, but he came from people of the earth. My grandparents were farmers, and I loved visiting their farm. We had what was called unstructured time, which now they call boredom. But I was never bored on that farm. I haven't even been bored since. Okay, I've been to some plays where I wished I was somewhere else, and other plays where I would have fallen asleep if I hadn't been the one talking. But I still have never been bored, and I've got my grandparents to thank. My grandpa was one of those German farmers as wide as he was tall. We used to say if it wasn't for the direction of his buttons, we wouldn't have known if he was laying down or standing up. And I think the story that sums up my grandpa best was a story about a Minnesota farmer, and he had 162 acres. That was it. That's all the land he owned. But he was so proud of his farm. And one day, a man from Texas was visiting, and the Minnesotan was talking about his land, and finally the Texan couldn't take it anymore. He goes, whoa, wait. He says, you know, my ranch in Texas, I get in my truck in the morning and I start driving. By nightfall, I haven't hit the end of my ranch. And the Minnesotan said, yeah, I used to have a truck like that. So that's my grandpa. My grandma was one of those German farmers, everything in its right place, everything in its right order. There was a rooster on that farm. That rooster loved to peck me. I'd say, Grandma, that rooster is pecking me. She said, just stay away from him. That's all. Well, one day that rooster pecked my sister, and that night we ate chicken. Toughest chicken I ever ate. But from that rooster I learned, be careful who you peck. So there was always a sense of fear surrounding my grandmother because you never knew what was going to happen in her presence. But once a week on Saturdays, we would get in the car and we would drive into town. They lived a population of about 5,000. We'd sit at angled parking, and my grandmother would have a running commentary of the action of the town. This was one of my most favorite things in my life. I mean, I think this was one of the reasons I became a storyteller, because just the ordinary day, my grandmother could make magic. She pointed out a guy, she said, that man has counted every step of his life. And sure enough, you could see this guy going past, and his lips were moving as he counted all of his steps. And then she'd say, oh, this woman passed the front of the car, I remember one time. And when she passed the grill, all of a sudden an undergarment, her drawers or something, fell from her dress and onto the sidewalk. But with this beautiful maneuver, she kicked them with her toe, and they flew up in the air and landed right in her purse. Like, without missing a beat, my grandma said, I would have left them. Then she goes, that restaurant closed. I knew they would. They open on the day of a funeral. Kevin, never open a restaurant on the day of a funeral. Okay, Grandma. And she sees this yellow car. She says, whose car is that? I don't know, Grandma. I guess when you don't know who someone's car is in a small town, it's cause for concern. And she sees her friend Charlene. She rolls down her window. Charlene, hello, Grace. My grandma's name was Grace. She said, hello, Charlene. Hello, Grace. Whose yellow car is that? I don't know either. All right, Charlene. All right, Grace. She's gone. And my grandma says, don't look. I look. She goes, that woman, she spits. Sure enough, this woman spit. Now, at the time, I'm 9 years old. I consider myself a champion spitter, known for accuracy and distance. But this woman's spit seems to do her bidding in midair. It goes around a fire hydrant and hits a cup. I look up, and she's staring right at me. And I hear my grandma say, Kevin, never fall for a woman who spits. But I'm thinking, Grandma, you are so too late on this one. Now, my grandma had rules in the house, like no dogs in the house. I said, Grandma, it's a wiener dog. It's going to die outside. She says, okay, but one accident, and that's it. And it would have been, too. But for some strange reason, that dog stayed right next to my grandma. I thought it was like those fish on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom that stayed near the sharks for self-preservation. But one day I look, and she's in the kitchen giving the dog a piece of turkey. So I told my brother, and he goes, yeah, I saw Grandma sneaking the dog food under the dinner table. And I found out, one by one, my whole family said, yeah, they'd seen Grandma give her treats. Well, I found out that that's how she gave out love. A little bit at a time, and you had to look faster, you'd miss it. But it was always there, never flagging and never in doubt. She didn't want to live on that farm. She wanted to live in town. And it seemed like once a year she would let it all out. We would go into the parlor and she'd sit at that piano and play songs from the 20s and 30s with her high voice cracking. That piano was horribly out of tune. But when my grandma sang, it seemed to all make sense. She had arthritis, and as it worsened, she would go into that room once a year and play through the pain. From her, I learned, always play through the pain, and there's beauty and wonder in the mundane, in the everyday world. So to me, she truly was grace. Oh. So a lot of people think of grace as this touch with the divine, but from that grandmother, I learned that it's finding the divine in the everyday. When does the divine present itself? And I discovered that there's this class that I was teaching with these kids, and I was telling them what makes you different gives you power. I said, so I'm going to prove it. I'm going to say, we're going to all find what makes us different, and then we're going to make superhero characters out of them. And so all these kids found out what made them different, and then we made superhero characters out of what made them different. And then we were going around the circle, and the kids would tell us their stories. And I get to this one little girl, and I said, what makes you different? Oh, she said, I'm really, really shy. And I said, I know you haven't said anything all week, but why does that give you power? And she says, because sometimes people forget I'm in the room, and I'm invisible, and I know everything. And she did. I could ask this little girl about anybody in the school, all the teachers, and she knew about everybody. And in fact, I'd be talking to a teacher sometimes, and all of a sudden I looked, there she is. And so I thought, I'm going to listen like that little girl. I'm going to listen with all the fiber in my body. And when you do that, you have this amazing thing called empathy, which is gaining the wisdom of another person without having to go through their experience. You just get the wisdom. And so I started listening really careful. But the first day, I remember I was on a bus, and I thought, I'm going to listen to invisibility. And I heard these two guys behind me speaking, and I'm pretty sure they'd had a couple to drink. And one of the guys goes, guess how old I am? And his buddy goes, don't you know? And the first guy goes, yeah, I know. And his buddy goes, well, then go with that. So it's already paying off. It reminds me, okay, there's this great folk tale, and it's about a couple that they live out in the country, and once a month, the dad goes into town for supplies. And one time, he's in getting supplies, and he sees a mirror. Okay, he's never seen a mirror before, so he looks into it and thinks it's a picture of his father. Oh, I gotta buy this, it's a picture of my father. So he takes the mirror home, and he puts it under the bed. And his wife is cleaning a couple of days later, and she finds the mirror. And she looks in. It's a picture of a woman. Obviously, the woman, her husband is having an affair with once a month. This looks just like the kind of hussy he would fall for. And so a huge fight breaks out, a frying pan's involved, and then a neighbor comes over and goes, no, it's a looking glass, it's a mirror. So now they're in love again, and she goes and gets a bag of ice for his head. But it's really true. It's really true. We don't believe what we see what we believe. And it's just like the people in the mirror. It's like this, a couple of years ago, I was working with kids in Alabama. And I remember this, I'll tell kids in class, if you had a good time and you want to come up and high five, you're out of luck, but we can high four all day. And this little girl comes up, and I know why, so I go, hey, high four. She goes, high two. And she holds up two fingers on one hand. So we high two. And I asked her teacher, I said, how's that little girl doing in school? And she goes, let me tell you. She said, we're doing it, it's near Thanksgiving, so we're doing that project where you draw around the hand to draw a turkey. Remember doing that in school? And the fingers are the feathers and the thumb becomes the head. And she said, put your other hand down and you'll have two turkeys facing each other. So the kids did all their drawings, and they hand them in, and she's going through the drawings. And she comes to that little girl's drawing, and there's one turkey with all of its feathers, then another turkey with 2 feathers. And she thinks, I wonder if that's going to hurt this little girl's feelings if I put it up on the board. So she got this idea. She told the little girl, if you want to redo your drawing and use the same hand for both turkeys, that would be fine. So the little girl redid her drawing, 2 turkeys with 2 feathers on both sides. I said, that kid's going to be fine. She said, oh, yeah, let me tell you, that kid is going to be fine. So there's a big difference between being born with a disability and achieving one later in life. With my right arm, I had to learn all kinds of different things. For instance, okay, I'm going to take it back. I get in my accident. I'm on a motorcycle, and I'm going through a crossway on Lake Street and Lyndale in Minneapolis. And a car pulls in front of me, and I don't remember hitting it, but at that exact moment, I remember I was given the choice to stay on this plane of existence or go into this amazing, beautiful peace that awaited me. And for some reason, I decided to return. And that has always troubled me. Why didn't I follow that beautiful peace? And I've talked to other people that have had a similar experience, and they say, yeah, there's something amazing and peaceful waiting for us on the other side. Oh, there's one person I talked to that had a different story. This woman in this theater that I work with, she had a near-death experience, and she got up to the pearly gates, and she said she looked in, and there was a no smoking sign, and she went, nope, can't do it. So she thanked smoking for saving her life. And so I came to that point, and I said, I decided to come back. And I thought, why did I come back? Why didn't I follow that peace? And then I remember being in Australia in 1987. It was so peaceful, so beautiful. I wanted to spend the rest of my life there. But I knew that my visa was running out, so I would have to return. But that's when this woman named Ray said she would marry me so I could stay there. I just met her that day. She said, I don't care, I'll marry you. And so I was going to marry Ray. But right before our wedding, right before my visa ran out, I said, Ray, I can't go through with this. I got to get back to this world. I got to get back to the belly of this beast where I can do something about the world that I live in. This is when I found out I need tension in my life. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that wears socks with sandals because I know it pisses some people off. So I came back to this plane of existence, and I came back to this world, and the surgeons had to put my face back the way it was. One of the nurses in the hospital actually said, you're really lucky. You probably won't have brain damage because your head used your face as an airbag. I know, thank you. So I had to have facial reconstruction, and so my wife, Mary, would bring in these photographs so the plastic surgeons could put my face back the way it was. But there was concern from my buddies, because in one of the pictures I was holding the dog. My friends brought in books on tape, and I found that Harry Potter helped me get to sleep at night. And when I couldn't go to the bathroom, Tom Brokaw's Greatest Generation got the nation moving again. And when I get down or depressed, I take a look at our wiener dogs, because you'll never see a more can-do attitude and a more can't-do body than a wiener dog. And it was said that God loves stories so much that he created people so there'd be an endless supply. And I feel very thankful I was given the chance to rework my ending. So I did return, and things have been different. Things have been challenging and different since then. For one thing, I had to get voice-activated software so that when I speak into a microphone, the computer writes what I'm trying to say. And it had to get used to my voice. My nuances, as they said. This is when I found out we got nuances in Minnesota. And so they give you the Gettysburg Address to read. And I remember when that movie Fargo came out. Remember the movie Fargo? I remember that movie came out. And people in Minnesota, they're so angry, they're calling the radio station, hey, what's the deal? We don't sound like that. I'm like, So, so I'm reading into this thing. I'm reading the Gettysburg Address, and it's writing what I'm trying to say. And the dog and cat get in a fight behind me. It's like, roo, roo, meow, 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 roo, roo, meow, meow, meow. And the computer starts writing, how, why, how, why. That explains a lot. So I got this job, and I got this job at a theater company. And I love this theater company. It's called Interact Theater Company, and it's for people, all kinds of people with different forms of disability. And there's this quote on the wall that says, work your quirk. And the first day that I'm in there, the first day I come in there, we sit in a big circle, and they ask, if you could take a pill to take away your disability, would you take that pill? And out of everyone in that whole room, I was the only one that said, yes, of course, I would take that pill. And I couldn't believe that the people in this room would prefer the body they have now than the one they used to have. I just couldn't even imagine it. But every day, I learned something new in that theater company. I remember there's this group of 4 singers, and they call themselves the Downbeats. They have Down syndrome, and they're the funniest, greatest group, and they're hilarious. Their lead singer is Laura Mullen, and we opened a show one time, and I mean, it was a disaster. Things like people were forgetting lines, props were breaking, a fire broke out backstage. We got it out pretty fast, but the sprinkler system came on, sending people out into the freezing cold night, and pandemonium. And Laura turns to me and says, I can't work like this. There's a woman named Ingrid, and Ingrid has aphasia, which is a condition that makes it really hard for thoughts to become words. And Ingrid turned to me one day. She was a third-year law student when a fever struck, and ever since then she's had aphasia. And she turned to me one day and she said, you know, I used to feel I think, therefore I am, but now I know we all come from a much deeper place. Now I know I am, therefore I think. And when she said that, I thought of Rumi's beautiful love poem, before right doing, before wrongdoing, there is a field, and I will meet you there. And why Shakespeare put the lover, the lunatic, and the poet in imagination all one, because they all go behind the mirror. They all go beyond what we see as real. If you've ever been in love, you know gravity goes from a law to a suggestion. And the poet, when he puts the poet, I think of Dante. Dante goes to the underworld, right? He goes to Dis. They called it Dis, which was Latin for the underworld. And Dante knew you cannot cure a trauma, whether it's a broken limb, a heart, a promise. The heart especially is an instrument once broken, never plays the same. But although it can't be cured, it can be healed. And Dante knew this. Dante knew Dis was a necessary step to paradise. And it's also the prefix for the word disability, which doesn't mean inability. It means able through another way, able through the world of shadow and reflection, a foot in 2 worlds, Dis. So I'm with this theater company, and I'm in Australia, and we perform this show. There's 5,000 people sitting on the side of a hill, and we perform the show, and at the end, 2 opera stars take the stage, Teddy Rhodes and Simon O'Neill. And the idea was when they were done singing their solos and arias, that we would join them in a grand finale. Okay, the Sydney Symphony was playing with them, and the symphony said, we haven't had this music long enough, and would it be okay if we finished on one of your solos? And Teddy Rhodes said yes, he would take the final solo. Our choir was crushed. I mean, we had been practicing for over a year for this thing, and now we weren't going to get to sing with these opera stars. So they sing their concert, and at the end of the concert, 5,000 people are on their feet. They're going crazy. These guys are like heroes to them. And they finally, their applause starts to die down. Terry Rhodes reaches behind his back and pulls out this piece of paper, and he gets everyone seated, and he says, look, we were supposed to end on another number, but the symphony didn't have the music, and I understand that. But on the way into this park, we passed another stage with an upright piano on it. If we can get to that stage, I think I can play this music. 5,000 people didn't bat an eye. They picked up their blankets and picnic baskets, and we all crowded around this tiny upright piano, and Teddy Rhodes sat down and played. And our choir with the voices of angels took that crowd before right, before wrong, to that place where I am, therefore I think. And that was the first time, the first of many times. There is no way I would have taken that pill to take away my disability. So, there's this one more memory that I was going to put earlier, but I didn't want to forget it, and then I did. So, but this one was a big one in my life. This one was one where I went to all my buddies said, you got to get on Social Security as fast as you can. Get on Social Security because it can take up to 2 years to get it. And so I said, okay. I went to get my Social Security, and they handed me a form to fill out. And the first question on that form was, what is wrong with you? And I couldn't do it. So I turned the piece of paper back in, and I get on the bus, and I'm waiting to go, and the bus driver says, I'm early, and he says, I'm early, I have time, I'm going to run across the street to the gas station and get a quick cup of coffee. So he takes off, and we're all sitting there. There's a woman up front, and she's got a button on that says, I feed my husband, but I talk to my cat. And she's talking to this woman in a wheelchair, and she's got a bumper sticker on the back of her wheelchair that says, I am a strong woman. When I get up in the morning, the devil says, oh no, she's awake. So those two women are up there talking, and this kid in the back starts going through these lists of cities. He's going through this whole list of cities in the United States, and the woman with the cat button turns to me and says, he's got one of those special minds. He can name every city in the world with a Walmart. She said, if you're riding the whole route, you should ask him to do it. It makes you want to travel. So we're sitting there, and this guy gets on the bus, and he has had a lot to drink. And he gets up in front of everyone, and he goes, Roger! And everyone on the bus knows the same thing at the same minute. There is no Roger, and one of us is going to have to be Roger. And sure enough, he comes back, and he sits down right next to me, and he just starts talking. He said, Roger, how you doing, old buddy, old pal? I said, I'm not Roger. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Okay. And before he passes out, he tells me he was the place kicker for the Miami Dolphins. He played piano for the orchestra and was a CEO of a corporation. If he said the name, I would know it. And I said, wow, this guy's had an amazing life. And he falls asleep on my shoulder, and we're sitting there when all of a sudden this guy up in front gets up and he turns. And he's got one of those looks in his eye, and something is going to happen. And he looks back, as my dad would say, there's a penny in his fuse box. He looks back, and he glances across everyone, and we're all just frozen in terror. What's this guy going to do? And he takes his finger, and he points to the woman with the cat button, and he says, she's in charge now. And then he leaves. We're all sitting there, still frozen in the moment, except for the lady with the cat button smiling. She's obviously pleased with his choice. And the bus driver comes back, and he says, did anything happen while I was out? Actually, no. No, it didn't. And this kid who was streaking through the names of the cities has now slowed back down to the pace, and he's going through the cities again. And the woman with the cat button is talking to the woman in the wheelchair, and the man laying on my shoulder is snoring peacefully. And we pull out into traffic, and we start to drive, and I'm thinking, you know what? There is nothing wrong with us. So I would like to finish up right now, and I want to thank you all so much for coming out. This is such a wonderful group, wonderful crowd. We've had such a great time these last couple days, and so thank you all very much. It feels so good to be back. So this is a poem that I'd like to close with. It's because it's called Tickled Pink, because my mom would say, when you're in health, your insides are pink, your innards are pink. So it goes, sometimes in our pink innocence, we find ourselves composting. We're waiting to grow. Or we rush headlong like so many of our ancestors. But it doesn't matter whether you're rushing or composting. One day you will round a corner. You will blink and something is missing. A heart, a limb, a promise, a person. And innocence is gone. And now, though channeled through a spectrum, your path is refracted. And some people don't recognize you. Some people want the old you. And some people cry that you have left it all. But what has happened and cannot be undone. We pay for our laughter. We pay to weep. Knowledge is not cheap. To survive, we must return to our senses. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And let spirit guide us. Our spirit is found in breath. With every breath we inhale, we exhale. We inspire, we expire. Every breath holds a possibility of a laugh, a cry, a story, or a song. Every conversation is an exchange of spirit, the words flowing bitter or sweet over the tongue. Every scar is a monument to a battle survived. And when you're born into loss, you grow from it. But when you experience loss later in life, you grow toward it. A slow move to an embrace that holds tight the beauty wrapped in the grotesque. An embrace that becomes a dance, a new dance, a dance of pink. Thank you.